How you going, Azzy?
Hi, I'm good.
That's the way. And we've had Pastor, your husband, on the podcast a few episodes ago. So I guess, how are you going today? Doing all right?
Yeah, doing all right. Pretty chill.
Yeah.
Enjoying the holidays.
Yes. So it's holidays for you now, eh? So are
Yes.
you a teacher?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
what exactly are you teaching at the moment?
I'm teaching English and I teach grade 8 to 12.
Yeah, right. So high school English, eh?
High school English, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, there you go. So you enjoying the holidays?
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Just catching up on some sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been busy at school, so yeah, you need all the sleep you can get. So guys, remember again to subscribe and to share this around with your friends, and just a reminder everyone to keep in prayer, please, for Andy and his family at this time. Unfortunately, his auntie passed away very recently, so just keep their family in prayers, and I'm sure that he'll appreciate that. So, Azzy, just getting back to the chat, tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how did you end up where you are in Good Shepherd right now?
Oh, there's a lot there.
There's a
But
lot-
yeah, there's
yeah.
a lot there. But I grew up in Sydney.
Yes, yeah.
My family immigrated from the Philippines when I was 5, but grew up there for most of my life, obviously, and then met my husband at church. We got married. He became the pastor of our previous church, was a pastor there, and then God called him over here.
Yeah.
And so we've been here for nearly 3 years. So, like, that's the short version of it.
Yeah, of course. And so I remember when we had Pastor on, we were chatting a bit about how he came to Good Shepherd for something, and then when he was driving back, I think it was for a conference, it was because he came up over the time period where we didn't have a pastor, and when he was driving back, he was saying how he felt, his whole family was saying, we got to go. So
Yeah.
from your experience from that, what was that like for you? Did you feel something from God there?
Yeah, I did, because we just driving home, things just felt different. Like from that moment, we already felt like we were actually leaving home.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
so that was really weird, like how quickly God had like knit our hearts with people here, and then even just him starting to do a work in our hearts for the people here, and just seeing all of that. But I think for me, going home from that trip when we came here, for me it was really important to see how our children were going to be, and
Yes.
you know, whether they would be open to that. And our kids, it was like I felt like personally as a mum, that was God saying to me, like, when our kids were asking to move to Brisbane, even though our whole weekend had been just about ministry, and we'd taken them to trips of like, you know, going overseas and having family holidays and stuff like that, but they just absolutely loved it, and they've never asked to like move to that place, even like for a holiday and whatnot. So like for me, in my heart, I felt like that was the Lord saying, like, your kids are going to be okay.
That's unusual.
And this is, because I think for me, that was the biggest factor. Like,
Yes, of course.
I did not want to be a hindrance to, you know, what the Lord was doing in my husband's heart. But I think it was just really interesting, like, when we talk about it, how God was just doing something in all of our hearts.
That's so cool.
So I think for me, that was the biggest comfort.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's really good to see, like, how God doesn't just talk to one person, He talk to your whole family, and that you all came to that decision together. That's really, really cool. And yeah, so I guess from that, I guess a question that I've been thinking about is, what is it like from your perspective in being a pastor's wife? What are some of the challenges and some of the benefits, I guess, that you could have a part of that? So what are your thoughts on that?
Being a pastor's wife, there's there's advantages and there's disadvantages.
Yeah.
A lot of the advantages, I think the privilege to have for people to be so open with you, and I think the privilege to just people opening their lives to you in that sense, and the access that we can have in getting to know people, I guess, from a different angle. So for me, it's more so like, that's the aspect of ministry that I love, and I think are the advantages to it. But I think there's also the disadvantages to it, which is like, you can't have ministry with people, but often sometimes it can also be the people that can hurt you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's also like, There's the good, and then there's the other part.
There's there's massive mountains and big valleys too. Is that
Yes.
that's definitely a big factor of it, and it's definitely very commendable to see like how you're doing that.
I feel like part of the nature of being a pastor's wife is like something that I learned actually from one of the other pastor's wives. Like one of the last pieces of advice that she wanted to give me was just that what I feared the most before my husband became a senior pastor was just living under scrutiny.
Yes.
You know, it's just like a new intensity and at a different level. But what she had, actually she gave me this poem, and I don't know where it is, but basically the thought was around living in a house with in a glass house, basically.
Everyone can see you
Everyone can see you. But I felt like for me that poem that she gave me was actually a big source of comfort, because for me, like, I had perceived that as like a really negative thing, and you know, like, there's no way, like, there's a human aspect to that too, and I think the fear of failing people and the fear of disappointing people, because I'm human. But I think when you let go of that and you recognize and accept that you are human, what that poem did for me was just reframe my thinking to that living in a glass house has its advantages too, in that people can see your humanity and they can see how God works in you and through you. And so reframing my thinking towards that way kind of took that pressure off, and just I just try not to focus on trying to play the role of a pastor's wife, but just try to play the role of God. What do you want me to do as an individual, and then try to live my life according to how he wants me to live, and try to play the roles that he wants me to play, but not necessarily because it's for everyone else, it's more so for him. So I think when I just try to keep my focus on him, then living in a glass house, it's okay. You know, like,
I was actually thinking, like, just while you're saying that, I was thinking, like, do you ever feel like everyone knows you as the pastor's wife, and does that ever like have a negative thought in your mind where we want people to know I'm like Azzy, you know what I mean? I'm not just the pastor's wife. Like, do you ever have those thoughts in your mind, and like, what's that like?
Actually, I was just thinking, I actually get that more so as, oh, I'm so and so's kid. I mean, so and so's mum. Sorry, not kid. Right. I feel like I get that more than pastor's wife. I guess that never really bothered me so much. Maybe because I felt like that wasn't my first transition. My first transition in terms of identity was becoming a mum. Yeah, and so I felt like that. I think the shock of that identity change and people just perceiving me more so as so and so's mum at that point. I felt like helped me ease into a different role, and so being known for that first, like, I guess didn't really bother me, because I had already gone through a different life change and sort of identity change being a mum. So I just felt like it was just another thing, but I'm still me. But then also recognizing that me also means like changing. It means growth. It means change and transformation. And we're not, I feel like the Christian life is never like we're ever stagnant, you know. But I think the true thing that does ground us is our identity and value in Christ.
In God, 100%. That's definitely evident in your life that there's been a lot of change. So let's talk about that change from coming from Sydney. Like, that's a very different culture to Brisbane. And then what was that like for you and your family, did you find, when you eventually did come up here about 3 years ago?
I really liked it, because at that point, 3 years ago, I feel like Brisbane was just a different pace.
Yeah, it was. It was very slow compared to
in
Sydney.
comparison to what we were used to in Sydney. Yes, we just had a very different lifestyle, and I think just because like it just felt like everything was just so go. You know, and sometimes just being in a larger city, sometimes it can just be a bit dog eat dog. You know, with that kind of culture, I guess, just like literally like being on the roads and everyone's just trying to get ahead, you know, so that's literal and metaphorical, you know. So
is it true that city drivers are worse than Brisbane? Surely.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
I would have to admit, like, that was a culture shock,
Yeah.
like, coming to North Brisbane.
Yeah.
Because but, you know, I liked it though, because I felt like people were a little bit more polite, like they'd let you in.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing.
I think the further out you go, the less people, the more friendly people come.
Yes.
You reckon? Like, even when I go out west to the farms and stuff.
Yes.
And everyone wants to come in, have a cup of tea, you know what I mean? Like, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, even like in quarantine and making phone calls and, you know, just having to organize things, I just wasn't used to people just having a chat with me over the phone for 15 minutes to half an hour, talking like we were all buddies, like even though I had never met them face to face, but they were just having a good old chat with me, and we were just talking.
That's
so,
awesome.
Yeah, like I just wasn't used to it. Like I thought, wow, is everybody in Brisbane like this? It's so nice, you know, like they just make time for you.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's definitely I guess a good thing about Brisbane, and that's awesome. So when you came to Brisbane and now you're settling in, so you've got your job now, so you're working as a teacher. Let's talk about that. So you've become a teacher. What's that like? Were you a teacher back in Sydney, or you just started now?
I was a teacher back in Sydney, but then there was a long period of time where I was full-time mumming.
Oh,
so,
yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I there's definitely like changes from the time when I first became a teacher to what it is now, because even in terms of the curriculum and that, like at that point when I started teaching, it was just like I was just used to teaching under New South Wales curriculum, and then they brought in the Australian curriculum. So
awesome.
those are some of the changes that.
What sort of advice would you have for anyone that might be expecting to have a child or has become a newly a new mum, for example? What advice would you have for them?
Oh, where do I start?
That's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, that's such a broad question, because I just felt like when I became a mum, like it was just not what I expected in a lot of ways.
What do you mean by that?
Like, where do I begin?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think where I can begin from that, because I just not in the negative sense of not what I expected. Like, I feel like you can never be fully prepared for motherhood, even though like as much as you try, like you know, I read all the books and you know, as much as possible. I was also really glad for some of the experience that I had through church, because I did volunteer for the nursery, so at least like with practical things like changing a nappy and feeding your baby, like that sort of thing, or like how to carry your baby, you know, that had given me some level of familiarity with them. But like I feel like having a baby and then being a mother are two totally different things. And being a mother takes a lot more work than it is just to, you know, have a baby and all of that. And I think those are the things where it's like, as a mother, you just truly learn that, you know, that passage in the Bible where it talks about like dying to self.
Right.
I was like, wow, God, I'm learning this on a whole
Every day.
different level every day
since
becoming a mother. You know, like the sleep depravity and you know, like not having like the same. But again, it's all like different seasons though, because like that's usually like for the newborn. Or even like, you know, not being able to do the activities that I was able to do, you know, and all those sorts of things, like those things that are sort of like rude awakenings. And you know, I won't go into all the full-on details, but sometimes I think like but I don't know, maybe it was just my perception, sometimes there were like a lot of glossy things that I perceived about motherhood, or maybe I had a romanticized perception of what motherhood was. I don't know, I feel like I had
a bit of Hollywood,
I feel like I had more of like a romanticized perception of motherhood than I did being a wife.
Oh really?
I think it was weird. I think so. Anyway, maybe it's because like, you know, you just hear too many stories and whatnot of like the realities of what marriage can be like and whatnot. So I really had no expectation, but I realized like becoming a mother, I felt like I had more idealistic expectations of myself as a mother. So I thought I thought that was strange, but that was just what I experienced. But again, it's like learning how to die to yourself on another level as well, like not just you know, in a spiritual sense, but also in terms of like
physical.
So that you know, it does require some sacrifice, you know, for your children and for your family.
So that's awesome. And so from following from that, how would you sort of balance throughout your early motherhood between you have a young family, you had ministry, and you're the pastor's wife, so you had so much going on in your life. What was that like for you back then?
It was crazy.
Pretty full on.
It was, yeah. I would say like just by the grace of God, like we got through it because at that point, so my husband was youth pastor, but he was also like wearing many different hats, and he was also heavily involved in the school. And then I was also teaching part-time, but then I was a new mom, and then I was also completing the final parts of my degree for teaching, which I was doing distance education.
While you just became a new mom.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's full on.
Yeah. It was full on. Yeah. And so maybe the sleep depravity was exacerbated by that. I think so.
Yeah. Dying to sell for it.
Yes, and also like get the deadlines and all of that.
Yeah, that's it.
So it was crazy.
Yeah.
But I just had to just take it a day at a time, and that's really where it was. Otherwise, everything else would have just been so overwhelming, and I did not even have time to think about what my life choices were at that point, because it's like, this is my life right now. Yeah. But honestly, like, it was such a joy though. Like, just to be doing the work of the Lord, and then also for like having little Vicky, so she was such a joy, and she was such a trooper as well through all of that. So honestly, like, I just thank God, like, it's just by the grace of God that we got through all of that. So,
and so what sort of advice would you have for someone that might be in that stage and like feeling overwhelmed and they don't know what to do? What would you say to them?
Well, first, I don't recommend it. But everybody has different capacities, obviously. Yeah. So I guess just beware. Yeah. But also, it does come to a point where I was just like, well, this is what I'm doing right now. So just being committed and just seeing it till the end. Because also knowing that was what I needed to do.
Yes.
But then also, I think what just helped me get through it was just taking it day by day. Because if I didn't, again, you just feel swamped by everything else that needed to get done. But otherwise, though, I think learning from that, though, and then even till now in terms of balancing everything, like I can look back at that and reflect, and what I am learning now is to accept what my limitations are, though.
Yes.
You know, and so when I was younger, and then because also like as you get older, even though like people can perceive me as someone that's still relatively young, but I feel the difference. Yeah, right. Like I don't have the same vitality that I did so and so years ago. So I think just accepting what those limitations are, and then communicating that and being okay with saying no. Yeah. And so I think that is an important part of prioritizing as well. Yeah, but sometimes it's not even saying no to other people. Sometimes it's just saying no to yourself. Right. And so I think so, even though that was what my life was back then, but I've certainly learned a couple of things from then to what I am doing now, even though my life now does seem pretty busy, but I'm also at a different season. My kids are a little bit older, a little bit more independent. What is going on
in your life at the moment? You seem very busy, I can't lie. So you're on holidays now? But...
Yes, on holidays now. So I do work part-time 4 out of the 5 days, and then ministry, obviously, and then, so it does seem pretty busy, but... I don't know. I think it's okay. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm drowning. I'm trying not to. So it's just trying to balance everything out. Yeah.
So I was talking to Pastor the other day, and he was mentioning this too. He was, in his message last night, he was saying, you guys have taken up Visitation and talking to some... what sort of gave him the heart for that, and how have you been finding that?
No, I've been really enjoying it. And I think, again, it's just trying to discern what season you're at. So obviously, like with doing things like that, then I did also have to step back from other ministries, because I had to reflect and think about like where I really felt like I felt like I was dropping the ball in some things, but I think for me those were some of the red flags, and then where I was feeling like really overwhelmed and then really emotional.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, sometimes the ones that get the full blow of that would be your family members at home.
Course, yeah.
You know, because you're just more emotional and things like that. And so I had to take a step back and go, well, why am I feeling this way? What needs to change? You know, and so even though those were good things, then I did also just have to reprioritize and recognize what season of life I was at.
Yes. Yeah.
And then just identifying that and the things that we wanted to prioritize working together was trying to get to know our people in a different way.
Yeah,
And so it was important for us to visit, but that also meant then I had to step back from a couple of other things.
Yeah. It would have been very, like, did you grow up in the church you were at in Sydney when you were a kid?
Yeah, in my teen years.
In your teen years, yeah. So it would be very different coming to a church and not knowing anyone compared to that. Yeah. So 100% like going around and visiting people. That's awesome that you're doing that, and like that way you get to know the church better. And I think we should do that more of that, like just individually. We should be out talking to people that may not be able to make it to church or things like that. Yeah, 100%. So no, that really encouraged me too to do the same thing. So I appreciate you doing that. So what is it like now as your kids are growing up? What are some of the new challenges or the new joys you're having through that experience?
With the kids growing up.
Yeah.
So I think that part of it is just the independence.
Yes.
Obviously, like them being a little bit more independent, and then having a teenager, and then next year we'll have 2 teenagers, and then Vicky, it won't be long before might be driving. Yeah. So not next year, but it's only 2 years away. So yeah, that is pretty scary.
Are you gonna drive with her, or is it just gonna be faster?
Yes, I will, but I will make sure she gets professional lessons first because I don't want to put my life at risk or hers.
When I was driving, my mum would not drive with me ever.
Yeah.
Even when I got my P's, like until I'm open, she wouldn't get in the car. She's like, no, I refuse. So there you go. Yeah.
Was that like survival?
Yeah,
instinct?
yeah, I think so. Dad had to do it with me, and I don't think he enjoyed that. I can't lie.
Well, I was surprised when I was learning how to drive because I thought my dad was the main one that was going to teach me, and for that first time, he did. But I think I traumatized him myself. So it's
just your mum after that?
So yeah, actually my mum. Yeah, and I think it was also part of out of necessity because like we served each other because she wasn't a confident driver, and at that time when I was learning how to drive, she was a nutrimetics consultant.
Oh.
And so she wasn't like as confident with like learning how to read a map or driving on the highways. And since I had to learn how to do that anyway, so she got me to do it.
Just done it for you.
Yes, yeah. So like I learned how to read a map and learn how to drive on the highway very quickly.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
that's full on.
Anyway, so.
Just throw you on the deep end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hectic. Yeah. So from a lady's perspective, who are some people that you look up to in your life that are role models to you or that influence you?
Currently or?
Yeah, currently. Yeah. And also when you're growing up, who'd you look up to? Yeah.
Growing up, I guess there'd be several people growing up. Like I think naturally it would be like, you know, your main forms of authority. So that would be like your teachers. That would be, you know, your pastor, his wife, that sort of thing. Those that were involved in the youth ministry. And then going into ministry, then it became more of like a mentorship between like, you know, the pastor's wife and myself. So I really appreciated that. But then I found that when I moved into the role of like being a pastor's wife, then God just brought people along. And so I think for me, what I had to learn was I also had to learn how to seek out wisdom. So if there was like a lady in the church where I thought she seemed successful in that area in her life, then I wanted to ask her about it, you know? So I think it just came in the form of like, where if I felt like I wanted to know more about something, then it was just like praying through and then asking God, like what resources are available to me, you know? And so whether that meant doing more study, because, or people,
Yeah,
you know?
so looking around you, seeing who is successful in a certain area and going and talking to them.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to be open to learning from anybody. So sometimes, like, even going through discipleship with another teenage girl, that didn't mean that I couldn't learn anything from her either. You know, so like, just for me, I just wanted to be open-minded to just learning from anyone. But there were significant people that did invest in me. So, so.
That's good. Yeah, no, that's really, really good advice. And to be honest, I do the same thing. When I look around, I see people that are successful in certain areas like business. I'm going to go to Brock. You know what I'm trying to say? Shout out Brock. Yeah. But yeah, like there's definitely that's definitely a good piece of advice. Let's move on to another topic. This is what I'm sure you're gonna love to talk about. Relationships. This is one that we wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
So, what would your advice be to young people who are single looking to get into a relationship? Let's talk about girls, for example.
Girls, like, so are you asking me as a guy?
Yeah.
Or do you mean like for a girl looking for a guy?
I mean, I think from your perspective, it's go from a girl looking for a guy.
Okay.
So let's do
all right, I can start there.
Yeah.
So I can start. So, well, before, you know, my husband and everything like that, I know that for me, my mum's biggest advice to me and her prayer for me was actually, she told me to start praying for my husband.
Yeah.
Because she said, more than likely he's alive. So she said,
How
you know,
I know,
that was like, I don't know. I think I was like 12 or something or 8. Yeah, I know. And I'm like, right. I'm not even thinking about this at this age. But anyway, but it did something in me. Yeah. So I just thought, okay, so when I would remember, I would just pray for whoever it was, you know. And so just praying. And the main thing that I was praying for was just, you know, God, I pray that he's doing right. You know, in that sense, and that, you know, you're forming him to be the person that you want him to be.
Yeah.
And then another really big thing that my mum, like, really just drilled into me was that just marrying to find a Christian man, but not just one who says he is, but one who actually lives his life like he is. Yeah. And so it was more so his heart, and that he was authentic in that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's funny though how, the pattern of like how it just, who he would introduce me to be would sort of just be in that ministry direction. And I was just like, oh, it's kind of freaky. But in terms of looking for the other person, I think those were like just the main things that I was looking at. So I was already just praying for whoever God had for me, or if he wanted me to get married. But then also that he was just authentic, and that he really did have a heart for God. Yeah,
so be authentic. Look for someone authentic and be praying for them. Praying for them,
Yeah, because I think, like, from my mom, like, I think what I learned from that was not that he just said it, but that he proved it, you know, so like his fruit and how, like, you kind of just come to observe him as a person, you know, so. And
so what was it like when you first started talking to Pastor Hullana? Was he smooth, or what was it like, mate?
No, well, it really just stemmed from friendship.
Right.
So we genuinely, even though everybody else, like, when I finally, like, told my friends, like, oh, you know, like, it's official, we're dating and
everyone
this and that, and it was only recent. Well, it was recent for us, you know, but for everybody else, like, they were like, ugh, that's old news. I'm like, what are you going on about? Like, because we were, like, friends for a while, like, just genuine friends. You know, but anyway, I guess everybody just saw it coming.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone saw it coming.
Yeah, but it just came from that. Friendship.
There you go. Nice. That's awesome. And what about from the other perspective? Are you trying to say something
well,
about that?
he thinks like anyway. You can ask him that way. Anyway, he jokes about it, but anyway.
No, that's good. That's good advice. And so anything else you want to talk about in like regards to relationship, or that's pretty good?
I think it's
yeah.
Well, did you want to do the other way?
I mean, I don't mind. Let's do the other way too. What do you reckon a guy should be looking for in a girl?
I think if that's foundational. So I think the foundational thing is that, especially just, you know, that she needs to be genuine in her heart for the Lord, especially for guys that are looking into, I think, ministry. That she's also got to have a heart to serve the Lord.
Yeah.
Because I know that at the beginning, okay, I'm going to be real, but at the beginning of our relationship, when we first started dating, it really did scare me because, again, we started because it bore out, like our relationship grew to more than a friendship, but that was the basis of our relationship. But he was quite clear with me early on that was a possibility of him becoming a pastor one day, or you know, some level of full-time ministry or whatever. So because even when we did start dating, actually, I'm trying to think, he was really heavily involved. I think he was already in full-time ministry.
Yeah, he was telling me about his schedule. He was busy back
he
then.
was really
head of the
busy.
youth, was he?
Yeah. And then just like starting the school and
of course,
like music ministry and design and like just like I suppose like he wore a lot of hats and so like even just like dating wise, like I struggled with that because I felt like ministry was the other woman in a lot of ways. So I was kind of jealous of that, like jealous of his time. And I felt like, well, I couldn't really get to know him.
Of course,
you know? And for me, like, because, I didn't quite understand it. And I think there were a couple of things that God had to teach me. Because I also thought it was interesting, because I also felt like, I think... God was also reminding me of a promise that I actually had made to him, because when I was 12, I actually went to a conference in Queensland where I remember going to the aisle and committing my life to the Lord and just surrendering and giving him a blank check to
That's awesome.
my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant. But I just remember feeling really convicted at that youth chapel service that I needed to, even though there was nobody else really there. But I just remember feeling so convicted and just giving him that blank check to my life, like just saying to him, like, my life is yours. But there were the beginning stages of that where it was just, I just had to figure that out, you know, and then also had to learn and be confronted with, like, I've got to resurrender. So there was actually a point where I tried to run away from it because...
Really?
Yeah, because there was an opportunity at uni. So I was at uni at the time when we were dating. But there was an opportunity for me to go overseas to do a student exchange. And I did really think about doing it.
Wow, you just wanted to get out, eh?
I think so, yes. And so I really was seriously considering it. And we got into an argument about it, obviously, and not that he wasn't being supportive and stuff like that, but I think he kind of knew that it was more than just that. And so, and I knew, I think, without even really fully understanding it at the time, but obviously, like, this is all hindsight looking at that stage of our relationship, was more so just because I just felt like I was running away from the Lord from that, because I did also feel like he was the right kind of person, you know, and I did have peace about him. And so anyway, like, in just saying that, I know that for him, he also got a lot of counsel. And so for him, in considering who his future wife was going to be, I know that he had prayed a lot for me, and I know that he definitely fasted for me. He did.
Bro, that's crazy.
He really fasted.
Pastor gave up food for you, eh?
He gave up. I know, which is such
crazy.
A huge deal for a guy in his 20s, right? Like,
that's a big
so
thing, mate. That's a
you
big
must
thing for us
relate to
guys,
that.
mate.
He
Oh
did.
my
He
goodness.
really fasted.
Mate, I've never fasted. Oh my goodness. For
No,
a girl, that's
but
insane.
no joke, he did. He really
Good on
did
him.
fast.
Yeah.
And actually, over that, I did actually break up with him for a period.
Really?
And I didn't talk to him. Yeah.
Because he fasted?
No, not because he fasted. No, but because, like, I just wanted to do my own thing. I
He's
was
like,
just
"You
like,
tried to
I
what?"
wanted... No, I was going to go over to
Yeah.
America and study overseas
Yeah,
and
right.
stuff like that. And so I was just like, you know, cut everything sort of thing.
Yeah,
But, but no, it's not because of anything like that. But I think it was more so that. Because I had no other explanation. There was nothing where it was like... You know, he did something and it was like, you know, it wasn't anything about that.
Was it sort of like this expectation that once you become in that ministry, like, that's it, your life's done? Was sort of that part of the thinking as well? Like, you're like, I'm in this for life now and that's it, that's my only option kind of thing?
No, I think for me, it was just... I think for me at that time, so looking back on it, it was more so just about my perception of God.
Right.
and not having the faith on, like, I had trust issues.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Is that from your previous relationships?
No,
just
not
in
from
general?
previous, just in general.
Yeah, right.
Like, so just in the sense of, like, I think it's a really scary thing to just lay it all before the Lord. You know, like, so even though you can say, like, I have faith in God, and, you know, like, all that sort of stuff.
To actually do it is another step.
But then I felt like ministry was just a whole new ballgame of, like, really living a life of faith. You know, like, in the
You're
sense
fully
of,
locked
like,
in then,
like, in that sense. And so I think I just, and for a while, like, in the early stages, I don't know, I just thought, like, when we were dating, he can do his own thing, and then I'll do my thing, you know. So I felt like, you know, basically I'll have, like, a different kind of life, and he'll have his life, and that's his thing, you know. So like, because he even asked me, like, to try to help and get involved in youth ministry, and I'm like, what for? You know, like, that was kind of like my attitude. Like, that was kind of my attitude at the beginning, you know. It wasn't a great attitude, but I'm being honest, I'm being real, you know. And I felt like, what are their parents for, you know, like, what I didn't really understand what a lot of those things were. But I think just, you know, through the messages and through things that God was doing in my own heart and life, you know, God broke through, and he reminded me of what I had promised him when I was 12. And then, because I was also going through, you know, a lot of questions and stuff like that when I was at uni. You know, and
actually, my mum did mention that this afternoon. She said, because I was talking about the podcast, like, she'd ask Azzy about some of the things she was struggling with through uni, because apparently you were. What were some of those doubts you had, maybe?
Yeah, no, because I really did struggle, because so I majored in history, politics, and philosophy. So you, like, pretty much on a daily basis.
History and what was that one?
History, politics, and philosophy.
Goodness me. From a worldly point of view. Was it a worldly university?
Yes, it was a worldly university.
So that would have been hard in your faith, for sure.
Yeah, no, it was. It was. But I wouldn't change it. So that's what I was saying. Like, he knew that I was going through a lot of stuff. Like, in the sense of, like, I think, I needed to learn through and go through those sorts of things. Because at one point I did even question, like, I had, like, see, it doesn't even make sense, right? Because I had this dialogue with God. I remember I was praying and talking with God and asking him, God, do you even exist? You know, the irony of that, right? Because it's like,
you're asking,
exactly.
Yeah. But it's true. I think that's so, like, we don't want to talk about much, but there's such a reality. Like, even like myself, like, at work sometimes, like, some guys will ask me and, like, really question, like, what do you believe? And the doubt is real. It can be real, and it's so true. And so I guess I can relate to that. I understand what you're saying, and I'm sure people that listen will be able to relate to that too. Like, when you have that doubt, what brought you back to having that faith in God? Was it the scriptures you read, like, or that feeling, the Holy Spirit inside you? What was it?
It was both. So there's I just felt his spirit moving in me to actually, like, it was just, it wasn't, obviously it wasn't an audible voice, but it was his gentle spirit just ministering to me, like, saying to me, I've brought you through things. I don't, you know the answer to that question. It was almost like, you know, him telling me, like, sort of like remembering what has happened in the past and to remind you of the present. And how he's just worked through my life and in my life, and his mercy and his grace, and where he's brought me to. So it was that. But then also at university, it did challenge me to think about what I believed and why I believed it. And so even though I was studying, I did also do institute classes at church. So we had institute classes, so I did that as well. So I was, like, doing extra study on top of, like, my full-time study and working 2 jobs, and that's what I was saying. Like, I was kind of crazy.
That's what. Time for
see, well, he was busy, so I'm like, fine, I'm gonna work 2 jobs, you know. So anyway, that's kind of So anyway,
like that's
but I just kept myself busy. But again, it was just all just part of it anyway. You kind of just learn through all those things. But so I did some institute classes to just help me get grounded. But then I did also have to I also went through a process of humility, because what I had to learn through that time was a lot of the feelings that a lot of the attitude that I had going through all of that was I just felt a lot of bitterness and resentment
Yeah.
and
Right.
just anger of like feeling angry about this and feeling angry about that. But I felt like what God offered was surety. He offered stability. He offered comfort, and that it was learning about faith in a whole nother way. Because it's like God isn't afraid of our questions. But what I had to learn, like I had to learn Romans 12, 1 and 2 in a whole different light.
What's that again? I can't remember.
With the but being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so what was really an important part of that journey for me was that yes, I could be learning about these philosophies, but then I had to learn what I believed and why I believed it, and then ask those questions of like, well, God, I didn't really understand this. You know, I thought I did, but now I realize I've just had a superficial understanding of it. And so then what that was for me, which is what I want to encourage other people is if you're ever feeling those doubts, then you got to learn how to search through the scriptures and dig.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
because and then ask people. So
Yeah.
my husband and I, we had a lot of discussions. We also had a lot
keep it
of
real.
discussions
Yeah.
around a lot of the questions that
Yeah.
I had.
Yeah.
And not just him, you know, I did ask my pastor a couple
Yeah.
of questions as well.
And that was relating to the course you were doing, or
Yes and no.
yeah.
So sometimes
What were some of the questions you were asking? If you don't mind talking about it, because I
Yeah.
feel like the questions you might think like they sound crazy, but I feel like a lot of young people might be feeling the same. You know what I mean? So
Oh, yes, well,
Maybe.
I really did struggle with the sovereignty of God.
okay.
That. So there
So
was
what do you mean by that? Is sovereignty, is that all power? Is that what it means? Or?
I think so. We're just like that he can do anything that he wants, sort of thing, or like the kind of
Right.
control and stuff like that. Concepts of freedom. I mean, and feminism was a big thing for me.
Yeah, right.
So there was that as well that
That's
I
a
had
very,
to.
very what's the word? That's very big in today's society. That
Yes.
whole question. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And questions on identity and
Yeah.
gender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did have a lot of questions around that.
Do you want to jump into that, or I mean?
I don't know, because this podcast can go on for a lot
Yeah,
longer
yeah,
than
we
that.
might have to do a part 2, guys. Like this video if you want to hear about feminism from Azzy. let's
I
hear.
don't know, am I going to get myself in trouble?
Yeah, that's it. Pass it by no, that's good. That's good. So that's very interesting, and that's one thing I'd love to chat about you in the future. So, guys, like up this video, comment below if you want to hear about that. That would be awesome. So, Azzy, yeah, that's really good. So let's move on. I just wanted to ask about coming up in the next few weeks. We got leadership conference coming up. By the time this is uploaded, I think leadership conference will be over. But from your perspective, is this your second time, or is this your third leadership conference now that you've been in Good Shepherd?
That I've been in Good Shepherd, this will be my third.
Third.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
what's the difference like from coming? Have you come up previously before?
Yeah, I have.
What's the difference like now? Do you find you can see more behind the scenes kind of thing, or?
I don't know. I just, yeah. What was my experience like the first time? Because I was at a different season of life.
Right.
So, because I had young kids,
Yes.
and so I was kind of more so in the nursery a lot
Right.
during those leadership conferences. But I do know that, like, what leadership conference did offer me and still continues to offer, I think the highlight of it is it's the preaching and the fellowship.
Yeah.
But I feel like in more recent years, the fellowship has definitely just
Encouraged. would you say?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like it's gotten better over the years as well.
It has gone better.
Yeah. If you're talking about like differences and stuff like that, then I'd say like the
Yes.
fellowship has become a bigger part of that. Like the
Right.
preaching was always a big part, but I would add that the fellowship in more recent years would be like
It's become-
another
has
difference.
improved a
Yes.
bit. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'd
Yeah.
say like highlights would be preaching and fellowship.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so I definitely encourage if you, well, by the time this is up, it'll be over. But in the future, come along to Leadership Conference because it's really good. And just talking about the preachers we got coming up, I'm so excited. I can
Yeah.
only be here at night, unfortunately, because I'm working. But I'd love to invite some of my mates from work to come along and just like Pastor Skelly, Pastor Shemish, Pastor Fisher's back as well, so praise God for that, because he was quite unwell. So it's gonna be a really good week, I'm sure, and God's gonna work 100%.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and so then what about TNS coming up? What are you're pretty keen about that?
It's been a while since I've been to TNS, but I'm excited. Yeah, it's been about 2 years now. I haven't. And I'm not going to TNS this time.
You aren't?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
No way.
No. But I am excited for those that are. Because TNS, I know, is... God does... Like, you just expect him to work. And you know that he will. And again, so that's what I'm really excited about for our young adults going over there. Because, again, I just think that if you make that investment in yourself, then... You know, it just goes a long way. You just, you know, over the years, you don't really truly recognize the significance of the impact until sometimes, like when it's years down the road.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about TNS last year was really good for me, because what you were saying about, like, giving, when you were 12, you gave God everything. I felt that sort of same sort of scenario at TNS last year. And that's, like, sort of around the same time that everything for PNG started to kick off. So it's really cool to see how, like, God... through those big events, although it's not the event itself, but that is a time where you get to draw close to God and hear from him. And make some very big decisions in your life. So,
And I know that, like, my husband calls that, like, mountaintop moments.
Right.
And it's those mountaintop moments that God uses. But it was never God's intention for us to stay in those mountaintop moments, you know. But God does use them to then propel us in our paths going forward.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I love about, you know, Leadership Conference, TNS. And I think that they really, like, for me personally, I really look forward to them in that time of the year. Because of that.
Yeah, awesome. So lastly, Azzy, before we wrap it up, what we usually ask our guests is one piece of advice that you could give to anyone listening right now that you've learnt from throughout your life. It could be broad, it could be specific, whatever you have on your heart at the moment that you'd love to share to people.
Okay. I feel like, well, because you have, like, a really, like, young demographic.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
And I know that, so I deal with high school students all the time, but not even just, like, high school students. Like, I think, like, I just feel for the younger generation. Right. And because I feel like you guys have a lot of pressures that are so different to what I had growing up, you know, and I think that I can see how and why a lot of the younger generation, like when they make commentaries about the younger generation, they say they're less resilient and they struggle with mental health. But I think it's also because of, like, you're so connected, but yet you're not.
Exactly.
You know, and I think what your generation is looking for is authenticity and real connections. But unfortunately, I think a lot of them are looking for it in the wrong kind of ways. And so I think if I was just to encourage all the listeners out there, but just anyone in general, and that is just making sure, you know, because you do go through times in your lives where it's just, you know, those connections will get tested. That's just the nature of life. And relationships. But I think when we strengthen true connections to our Savior and get grounded in our identity in him, but also in our relationship with him, then when times do get challenging, it's just about getting back to the vine and making sure, like, our attachments, like, are strong with him. Because then, you know, all those other things sort of, like, I think they may or may not come into place, but like, what I've just learned over the years is that, like, people will let you down, even those that are close to you, but they're human, but God doesn't. You know, and so I think if I can just encourage you that way, and that is just, you know, I know you guys are looking for something real, but God is real. And so I do want to just encourage you in that way. And if you don't know what a relationship with him is like, then I just want to encourage you that you can find out.
That's awesome. Wow. I got a little motto from that, from what you just said. I just thought it. I said, don't live for likes, live for the Lord. There you go, eh? That's true. It's true though. Like, honestly, what you're saying, when you were saying that, I was just thinking about, like, social media and, like, just what it's all about. Like, it's just, you feel like you have so many people, and then as soon as you turn your phone off, you think about it, like, You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's empty.
It's different. It's all empty. So yeah, no, it's definitely a struggle that is definitely new and related to what we have to go through. But no, it's definitely some really good advice for people that are listening to this. So, again, thank you very much for coming on, guys.
Thanks.
Make sure you guys like and subscribe and comment down below if you enjoyed it. And again, Azzy, thank you very much.
Thank you.